So Robert Pinsky, there's an ancient and deep relationship between Jews and books and Jews and words, and at times it seemed that all Jews have had to hold on to were books and learning. Did this propensity towards learning lead to creativity, and how?
I've been thinking since a few minutes before we came on, my friend Gloria Levitas said that this engagement of Jews with creativity, she pointed out that it has a history. And if we think of it as genetic, it's sort of obnoxious, not only because racism is obnoxious, but there's something complacent about it. And what she pointed out was that you had this bottled up, hermetically sealed culture for centuries. Mm-hmm. And then it had this collision with the secular outside world, science, art, etc. And that remark makes me think of a rather striking and somewhat unpleasant book called The Ordeal of Civility by John Michael Cudahy. And the proposition of that book is that in the late 19th and early 20th century, the Jews coming from the East into Western Europe had this crisis where they were becoming part of a society but not of a culture. And civility was an ordeal. And the figures he talks about, the first two he talks about are Freud and Marx, the convert Marx. And he makes a rather persuasive argument that Charcot had pointed out the sexual nature of family relations, but had drawn back from it. Freud said the thing that was rude or unpleasant to say about the sexual nature of human behavior. And people had said things that were uneasy about property. Marx could say it. And Cudahy, he goes on to Levi-Strauss is another person he talks about. And his proposition is that this energy that was bottled up was partly the energy of argument. And in fact, what Zeke said is like an amplification of what you said about tradition. In my notion of tradition, if what you do is attempt to preserve it and freeze it, you're betraying it. It's a gift you get from the past, and if you can take proper care of the gift, you study it, you preserve it. If you don't transform it, you're betraying it. Each time you have to do something different with it. Certainly a principle in performance and in composition, that if you try to just turn a thing to stone, it turns to stone. It stops being alive. And in poetry, if you actually read Yiddish poetry, it's rather upsetting. If you read Moshe Leib Halpern's elegy for Peretz, it's the phrase anti-Semitic comes to you. It's very painful to read it. And that short-lived, incredibly brilliant culture. I mean, Yiddish writing in a fairly small span, 50 years, whatever it was, they had to go through all the periods and all the schools of literature. And there's a terrific comedy and ferocity. Talk about conflict also involving comedy. And this, let's leave English out of it, that energy, that rather anarchic, tormented, uncivil energy in Yiddish poetry, it goes right into Hebrew poetry. So that I feel I can hear some of it even in Amichai. You can hear some of that historical, and we are still in a way happily, whether we're Irving Berlin or Mel Brooks or you, we're still coasting along on the energy of that generation that really felt the pressure of the explosion. Turns out Giselle's great uncle is Chaim Nachman Bialik. And as an example of how creativity is not a pretty thing or a benign, mom and pop have a nice little boy who sings the agony in it. It's only 16 short lines. Chaim Bialik's Light, poem about light, by which means creativity, energy. I didn't win light by some stroke of luck. It wasn't left me in my father's will. I carved my light from living rock. I quarried it out of my heart. Deep in that rock, a spark is hidden, not large, not much, but mine. Not rented, not borrowed, not bought, not stolen, light entirely my own. Sorrow hammers its mighty blows, and the rock endures till it cracks with a bright flash that blinds my eyes, light that I seal into verse. When you breathe lines I made, which I'm doing now, when you breathe lines I made, they kindle a flame, vanishing bright. With my own marrow and my heart's blood, I pay the price for that light. And it's, he's saying this is not easy. I didn't inherit it from my father. I couldn't afford to buy it. It was improvised. I made it up as I went along.